For a fourth straight year, Nebraska is opening up their season against a conference opponent. This year, it is against the Minnesota Golden Gophers, a program that has been rock solid. Back-to-back 9-win seasons. If you skip over the 2020 season, they also were coming off an 11-win year. They own Nebraska the last 4 years, including the last 3 years winning by 7 points. If we take a look at last year's game, if you remember that Nebraska didn't have Casey Thompson. They jumped out to a 10-0 lead at halftime behind Anthony Grant's rushing. But Minnesota made some adjustments in the second half. They put in Kaliamakis, who started that second half. They took advantage of an interception and then outscored Nebraska 20-3 in that second half to get a 7-point win. And so what I want to do is I want to take a look at this Minnesota team, this offseason preview, kind of highlight what Minnesota is, who the key players are, who they're missing, and kind of get into that before giving my ultimate prediction on how I think this game is going to end up playing out. Now, as I said, Minnesota is coming off a 9-win year, but they did lose some key players. Most notably, a team that's built on their offensive line. They're going to have to find 3 new interior offensive linemen, including stud center John Michael Schmitz, who was a second-round draft pick of the New York Giants, and running back Mo Ibrahim, one of the better running backs in the Big Ten the last few years. He went undrafted, but a lot of that was just because of injury concerns about his Achilles and holding up long-term. Defensively, Minnesota only returns 4 starters. They did have 2 guys from their secondary get drafted. Jordan Howden and Terrell Smith were both taken later on in the draft, so they'll have to replace half of their secondary. Now, they don't return a lot of starters, about 4 on each side, but they do have a lot of guys coming back. Chris Ottman-Bell is probably the biggest name they have as one of their weapons. He's not counted in that returning starters because he missed his season ended after the first 3 games. But he comes back. If you don't remember him, he torched Nebraska a few years ago in the slot. Nebraska tried to have Will Honus and safeties cover him in the slot, and he just tore him up. He's a thicker slot, kind of a guy, looks like a running back playing receiver. Very good in short to intermediate routes. Has the ability to go deep, but he's gonna eat you up underneath. Like I said, they got some weapons. Minnesota has always been known under PJ Fleck as being this power running. We're gonna have a big offensive line. We're gonna have a strong running back, and we're gonna beat you up there. But they have a lot of the guys that they have coming back are their weapons. I mentioned Chris Ottman-Bell. Daniel Jackson is back. He was kind of their deep threat. He was a guy that can go deep. He had a really good contested catch for a touchdown against Michigan State. He was their leading receiver last year. With Chris Ottman-Bell being hurt, it was Daniel Jackson who stepped up and took the lead for the Golden Gophers. But I honestly think the best player that they have on their offense, and maybe the best player on their entire team, is their tight end, Brevin Spanford. Here's a guy that's 6'7", 270 pounds. He's a big weapon for them. He's a good blocker, but he's also a guy that they can lean on. He's got good hands. He's got the ability to make contested catches. He's not this ultra athlete. He's not like Kyle Pitts out there running around as a tight end, but he's got enough speed. He's got enough quickness at the stem that he is going to be a weapon. And he's a guy that I like a lot. I look at the tight ends that just got drafted this past year. Michael Mayer from Notre Dame was a guy that went in the second round. The little that I've watched of Brevin Spanford right now, I like him better than Michael Mayer. And then, as I mentioned, They do return both their tackles. The guy that is the better of the two is Ariante Ursary, their left tackle. He's a guy that's a good college offensive lineman. I don't know how well he's going to transition to the NFL. We'll see how the season pans out. But he's got a lot of tools. He's got athleticism. He's got the strength to lean on you. But he's their best lineman coming back. Defensively, like I said, they only have 4 guys coming back. They got a young sophomore linebacker that showed a lot of potential last year. But a guy that's on NFL draft radars is Tyler Nubin, their safety. He reminds me a lot of a Jamal Adams type guy. If you're an NFL fan, bigger, strong safety, but he can kind of do it all. They had him kind of come up into the box a little bit. He covered guys in the slot, played a little deep half, zone coverage, and is a guy that is kind of going to get moved all around. He also had 7 interceptions the past couple years, so he's a guy that can not only stop the run, but he's also shown the ability to make plays in the secondary. And they were active in the transfer portal, bringing in several different guys. They really hit up Western Michigan. So PJ Fleck went back to his previous stop to get some of those guys. The top transfers they didn't have the strongest ratings for their transfer class. On3 had them ranked as the 28th, which, I mean, it's top 30. 247 had them as 38th. They got a lot of guys, and they didn't lose a ton. But a lot of the guys they got, they weren't getting out there and getting those top guys. Their 3 top guys, Elijah Spencer is a wide receiver from Charlotte. He was 138th on3's transfer rankings. He's a guy that's a Charlotte receiver, deep threat once again. He had nearly 1,000 yards receiving last year, 9 touchdowns. But the guy that I think they really kind of look for is Sean Tyler, the running back from Western Michigan. He was on3's 197th ranked transfer. He had just coming off back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. The thing that's interesting about him is Minnesota's going to be looking for him to kind of replace Mo Ibrahim, and he's not the type of running back that they typically have. You think of Mo Ibrahim, you think of Trey Potts, who they also had last year. Physical, downhill runners. Sean Tyler's a more shifty guy. He's more of an outside guy. Quick, fast, pass catcher. He's going to be the guy that they're relying on. So it'll be curious to see how that fits within their offense. Under PJ Fleck, Minnesota wants big lines. They want a big offensive line. They want a big defensive line. Offensively, they want to pound you. They're going to run the ball, pound it between the tackles, lean on you, and hope to wear you down over the course of the game. But they're only returning 2 starters. Their left tackle and the right tackle. They don't have that experience. They've got guys that are surely going to come up and going to play well, but they have to gel and get that experience. And you're playing a Nebraska team who they haven't had. This is the first game of the season. It'll be interesting to see how Nebraska's 3-3-5 does against this bigger offensive line. You know, Nebraska's got some smaller defensive tackles. Is their speed, their quickness, their ability to create penetration going to help them against this Minnesota team? Or is Minnesota's size going to be able to lean on them and negate them? Tanner Morgan, the quarterback, he's gone. But as I mentioned, Ethan Kalimakis came in last year to be their start at the second half and led Minnesota to a come-from-behind win. Now, he didn't do a ton in that game. He showed some running ability, and that gave Nebraska a little bit of fits, kind of allowed them to extend some drives. He's got tools. He's got a strong arm. He can move. I haven't really, in the games that I've seen him play, he hasn't really put it together. It's a lot of flash. He's toolsy. Can he put that together? And so you got Callie Mathis, You've got Sean Tyler, who I mentioned at running back. You've got some good receivers. Are they going to air it out a little bit more? Gone is Kirk Soraka. He went to Penn State and he came back for a year. Now he's at Rutgers. They're co-offensive coordinators. Their tight ends coach, the receivers coach are combining to be the offensive coordinator. Are we going to see them air it out a little bit more? You got Chris Ottman-Bell, you got Daniel Jackson, you got Brevin Spann-Ford, you got Sean Tyler, who's a receiving guy. They get the Charlotte wide receiver transfer. Kaliamakis has got a strong arm. Are we going to see them throw the ball more? All right, defensively, as I mentioned, 4 returning starters. Newman is, I think, one of the better safeties in college football. Cody Lindenberg is that ascending linebacker, kind of rotational guy from the early part of the season, got some starts late. He's a guy that can kind of fly around and make some plays. But I think the biggest concern is, can they generate a pass rush? Here's a defense that only had 19 sacks last year, and the most they had was an individual had was 3.5, and that's one of their defensive ends. And their cornerback Terrell Smith, who just got drafted by the Chicago Bears, he was their second leading sack guy. And so they went. They didn't really bring in a whole lot, so they're hoping that some of these guys coming up, can they generate some? Can they improve? They weren't good last year, and they didn't really add anything. Is that going to be a big concern? Right? They went heavy. They didn't go heavy into the transfer portal to get a pass rushers. They went heavy to get secondary. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on. Nebraska offensive line has been some issues lately. They don't have a good pass rush. Is that going to be in Nebraska's favor? Now, I'm always the optimist. I always think Nebraska can win every game. Don't get me wrong. And if this game was in Lincoln, I would probably be close to 100% certain that they're going to win this game. But it's not. It's in Minnesota. It's an opening week, Thursday, first game in the Matt Rhule era. You've got facing off against a program that's been led by PJ Fleck for 5-6 years. Team that's won 9, whatever the 2020 season was, 11 wins, 7 wins before that. This is a team that just knows how to win. And we've seen that the last couple of years. 4 straight against Nebraska. Nebraska's had a lot of dysfunction. They should have probably won those games, but they just couldn't get out of their own way. And Minnesota, to give them credit, they won those games. They found out how to win. But I always go back and say, with all that dysfunction that Nebraska's had in the Scott Frost era, and even last year with Mickey Joseph as the interim coach, they were still in a position to win games and win these games. And I think Nebraska has a very good shot. I think this Minnesota team is going to take a little step back. Could they still win 9 games? Yes, they could. This team could easily be a 7, 8, 9, 10 win team. But this is a team that's vulnerable, in my opinion. You've got a quarterback who's got tools, but can he put it all together? You've got an offensive line that's trying to work in 3 new starters. You've got some weapons that are coming back, and Brevin Spann-Ford's really good. But what about the other guys? Is Chris Ottman-Bell an elite receiver? Is Daniel Jack? They're not elite guys. They're good college weapons. And so I think Nebraska could very well win this game. I think they have a great shot, but they're going to need Jeff Sims to be what Matt Rhule thinks he can be as that future NFL quarterback. They need the offensive line to be what Matt Rhule has been saying, how they've got so much talent. And I think Nebraska's going to want to pound the ball, run the ball early. Defense has got some guys that can make some plays. And so Nebraska could very well win this team. I've thought, Nebraska's had a lot of talent. They've just haven't had that competent head coach to kind of steer them in the right direction. And I think Matt Rhule is that guy to do that. Now, that being said, I don't think Nebraska's going to win this game. I hope they do. I think they've got a great shot. But I think Minnesota's consistency, their foundation that they have with this program, they can, they've lost offensive linemen every year and just reloaded. They've had running backs come through. Ibrahim missed an entire season a couple years ago, and they just always seem to have guys. And I just think being in Minneapolis on a Thursday night, first game in the Matt Rhule era, I would love to see them win, but I just think this game might just be too tough, and just Nebraska might not have enough. And so at this point, I want to say win, but my gut just tells me Nebraska is going to have another close loss, one-score game that we're unfortunately all too familiar with. I hope I'm wrong. I want to be wrong, but last year I thought they'd win 8 games. They only won, 4? So at this point, I've got to see it first. So that's going to go ahead. Hopefully, if you didn't know much about this Minnesota team before this video, hopefully you found out a little bit about it. I want to do one of these for every single opponent, an off-season preview. To get them, make sure you subscribe. So hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to get all the notifications. Thanks for watching. Until next time.